Day 1, 12 o'clock. Bobby found the studio. He managed to escape from the exclusion zone. He headed out on the freeway when the soldiers showed up, then the helicopters, guns and trucks. There are rumors that some people are sick with something. Then they walk funny. They say it starts with a fever, but Bobby missed it all. Someone said that they are violent, but Bobby didn't see no fight. 6 p.m. Twiggy is on the air. He thinks listeners might be interested to hear someone who is inside the Knox event zone. He lives in West Point, owns a bar. He went away to visit his cousin, but weird things happened last night. The helicopters were flying low over him to Marlboro. Such things are kinda common. It's a military town. Twiggy even serves soldiers with drinks sometime. But now it was just out of place, unusual. He'll be back tomorrow. It's impossible to leave this place. Madison called the radio. She claims that it was all planned before. She's talking about quarantine measures, all those helicopters, all those soldiers just appearing. Her son was in Desert Storm, and she definitely knows that this kind of work could not be done in a couple of days without preparing. You can't move so many soldiers so quickly. The government knew that a storm was brewing. They knew this might happen. The host confirms that people inside the zone can't call. Apparently, Knox telecommunications have been working on the lines and they've been out for a week. That's long before the blockade was set up. There are a lot of folks hungry for a conspiracy on the lines. Now Christian inside of the exclusion zone is on the air. His phone is still out for 9 days. Guy from Knox Telephones came round and said to expect some disruption. Now Christian is calling from his sister's place in Louisville. The phone lines are still working there. They definitely want to get away because unpleasant smell spreads from the other side of the water. It stinks. It gets into your lungs. That's exactly how people get sick, Christian thinks. James called the studio, complaining that the communication is not working and the lines are down. He is surprised that in 1993, during the Knox event, there is no way to establish communication through alternative ways. The host suggests that the abundance of the military bases in the area might be the cause. But the conversation leads nowhere. Catherine called the studio and claimed that it was all about the meat. The host asked if she was referring to BSE or mad cow disease, to which Catherine replied that some guy on Triple N wrote a book about it. Said it gets into your head. You eat burgers and the disease gets into your brain like Kuro. Catherine's son worked at Spiffo before the quarantine started. You know how much he cooked? He cooked a lot. A whole lot. Retired Colonel Smith from Arkansas called the studio, noticing some anti-authority sentiment on show. He decided to give an inspiring speech mentioning that his daddy was a soldier, and the daddy of the daddy was a soldier, and the daddy of the daddy of the daddy was a soldier, and then he, and then his son. They shed a lot of blood for the US, for democracy. He urged listeners to have faith in our troops and not to lose spirit. As we don't know their orders, but we know exactly they're doing the right thing, no matter what. A person named Ethan called the studio and began to preach. What is happening today in Knox County is punishment for our sins from the Lord. He said that what we need to repent, realize our guilt, and wait for his arrival. However, this call is quickly forgotten, as much more interesting news comes in by lunchtime. At noon on the third day, listeners were greeting with shocking news. If you haven't heard yet, all flights outside the United States are grounded. Domestic flights are still available, but if you try to travel abroad, you're gonna be disappointed. The initiator of this decision was the World Health Organization. For the first time in history, America finds itself isolated. A patriotic man named Todd Kolzenenga, an entire nation should not suffer because of someone's fear of catching a cold, especially a nation that has been founded to get away from those old world bastards. Latoya from Louisville is calling. She reports that she can't even step outside her own apartment. Why? Because there's a goddamn tank in her street. She never seen so much camouflage in one place. The soldiers are everywhere, looking for something and heading somewhere. Meanwhile, there are riots in New York and Miami. But people in Louisville are scared and trying to head north, vehicle after vehicle, some folks on foot. It's a traffic. Abigail's on. She calls inside of the exclusion zone. She's desperate and can hardly find words to say for the family broadcast. But it doesn't matter to her, considering that her husband is dead and she's as good as dead. She says that the government is not trying to protect the people. They're trying to protect themselves. Abigail says that there are military labs and secret facilities everywhere. And when the host asks for evidence, she angrily shouts that there is a goddamn exclusion zone filled with evidence. At 6 a.m. of the fourth day, the host announced an important news. A curfew has been imposed. From 6 p.m. tonight, people are required to stay at home with their families. Judging by the situation, the host is located somewhere on the border of the exclusion zone, and she does not specify the city, only saying that the things are bad in the Nowheresville. The shelves are empty. Someone barricaded themselves in a bar, but they will soon break through. She is afraid to even imagine what's happening in the city center. After opening up the lines, Claire called in. She combines previous conspiracy theories that the virus is being contained in mid air, adding that the meteors were also flying in the sky at night. The host makes fun of Claire's words, but apparently she's very serious and claims that the curfew is the right move. But it's already too late. A lot of voice on the Knox Talk Radio, as you'd imagine, and a woman named Daniel got the mic. She's calling from a car phone in some kind of quarantine camp for survivors. Daniel claims that the authorities are lying. They, with her mother, were together, but she was bitten, and the military separated them, taking her mother into quarantine. She doesn't understand why soldiers who are supposed to help people did such horrible things. Now she's in the camp, but it's not safe there. People have changed. They're trying to kill you. Everyone is trying to kill you. Kelly's on the air. She and the host discuss about the disturbing images that have emerged from the event zone. They aren't giving a direct explanation on the radio, but apparently the infected person in the photo has a detached arm, and he seems indifferent. He's not even blinking. Kelly knew this guy. She and her son were at the cinema last week where he worked. Apparently, he was already infected back then. Now strange, I'd say scary things are happening to him. Long before the quarantine started, on July 4th, something strange began happening with television and radio in Knox County. Unlike the phone connection, broadcasting didn't disappear, but now you can only hear something at certain times. However, it's only possible to catch something other than interference at midnight, 6 a.m., 12 noon, and 6 p.m. Usually, broadcast appears for half an hour to an hour, and then suddenly stops. This night, there was no broadcast. A mystery caller is on the line. He's claiming that he works as a janitor at the military base. He asserts that he has signed so many forms and agreements that he's absolutely certain that something horrible is happening. However, the janitor cannot provide any information except that he has seen so many soldiers doing some experiments and that one guy had a service dog, but it disappeared. He began to say that the incident was the work of terrorists. But the host politely interrupted him and asked listeners to call back only if they actually know some facts about the event. A caller reached out to the studio claiming that he escaped the exclusion zone. A young man named Charles was in the zone with the other survivors when suddenly, all around them, the dead woke up and became alive again. People ran to the north and stumbled upon soldiers in hazard suits. They were thrown into trucks and taken away. There was a lady and the soldiers just shot her. Back then, Charles didn't understand why, but later, he realized that the military had actually done her a favor by sparing her from a painful transformation. They were kept in a military camp, in something called quarantine. When people got sick, they were taken away for tests. Sure, for tests, through an inch of hazard suit plastic, of course. They never came back. Finally, 2 days ago, people woke up to find that the cells were open. Soldiers were gone without a trace, except for one, a guy in a uniform who'd been filled with bullets. Apparently, he disagreed with something. People went north and crossed the border of the exclusion zone without saying a single word. They feel like they've seen hell. Jan is on air. He is grateful to the radio station for being the only voice of truth in a realm of lies. Other journalists like Jackie J, who sat on McGrew's lap and spitting his lies, simply broadcast what they're told to. Jan manages to say that people in there are dead, including his daughter. The host starts saying that she understood something, but it can't be heard. Here it becomes clear that the real madness is happening. At midnight on July 13th, the curtain falls, revealing the harsh truth. The president is doing nothing, and people are scared. Fire hoses have been turning angry crowds in New York, looting and arson in Los Angeles. Criminals using the climate of fear to their own advantage. Footage has been released of people taking TVs, computers, electronics, and anything else they can steal from store shelves. The studio is still taking calls. The host is asking if listeners are safe and what they think about rumors of a curfew. She asks people to call. Call right now. Just call. Another listener called the radio station with a conspiracy theory. She asks to calculate the length of the incubation period. Indeed, the first symptoms appear in 2-3 days after infection. As the caller claimed, it all started on Independence Day for a reason. She believes it was terrorism. Well, terrorism is her point. Daniel from the quarantine camp outside of the exclusion zone calls again. She speaks in a whisper, telling she's there, lying on the backseat of the same car. Some kind of madness is happening there. There were gunshots and then there was a huge wave of infected people. Hundreds of them over the perimeter, thousands maybe. People are dying everywhere, and the soldiers... Seems like there were not enough of them, or they didn't have enough guns. Daniel doesn't have time to finish her speech, cutting off mid-word. The broadcast is filled with screams of horror and a monotone moaning. Danny called the studio. He and his family live on a small farm next to the river, and he recently swam it, heading towards Louisville. Why? His sister went into West Point to see what's going on there, and there are no more living people. Everyone, literally everyone had turned, rising up. One of those creatures took a chunk from her wrist. Then he cleaned the wound when she got back, but it just got worse. Then, she died. She died, but she hadn't gone. Then he swam across the river somehow, and his sister is still at home, standing there, dead. How the fuck is this happening? The situation inside the exclusion zone is getting worse. People are running away, Carl is on the line saying that everyone is leaving Louisville and moving north. She can't leave because she got 3 children under the age of 6 and her husband's missing the whole week. She can't go because of kids, and husband may come back soon. They have enough food. Carl doesn't finish talking. There is a loud knock on her door, and it's clear that someone intends to rob them. At 6 a.m. on the 7th day, the signal came back and a man called Mike on the broadcast, teaching how to properly kill the infected. He advised to shoot strictly in head. If you don't have a gun, then you find a goddamn gun. If you lose your gun, then use a bat. The man schools how to kill the undeads better, explaining that shots or strikes anywhere except the head won't stop them. The bullets to the torso limbs, they don't slow them, and they surely won't hurt them. When the host mentioned that these are people's families he's talking about, Mike sobered the listeners up by declaring that the infected are no longer humans. Brian is on the air. He's at a gas station and chaos is unfolding in front of his eyes. It's like some kind of nightmare. Mad goddamn Max. People are scared. They've taken all the food and there is fighting in the line for gas. But if they think those cars can get anywhere anyway, it's insane. Roads are stationary. Dead and semi-dead bodies are scattered everywhere. And they will come back. Everyone knows it. Just no one wants to take the responsibility. Not yet. Brian doesn't know if he can handle it, and talks that up ahead there will be more bodies. Not quite dead, and someone's gotta do it. The atmosphere of silence and fear reigns all around. The host decides to summarize what is currently known about the Knox event disease. They're dead. They bite. You don't want to get close. The truth has been kept from people. Nobody understands why. It seems like the spread of the infection has been slowed. But for how long? On the line is Mary. The military killed her father. He wasn't scratched. He wasn't bitten. He didn't even go near the infected. But the soldier said he was sorry and shot him. Turned gun on the girl and then he blew his own damn head off. The situation is getting more and more insane. At midnight on the 8th day, the broadcast continued unusually long. The first caller was a man from an old folks' home, apparently from the staff. He claimed that the virus is airborne. People are sick without the bite. He just saw 20 people died in an hour. They're still here, in their chairs. Only some are crawling on the floor. People are turning fast. The host announces that the Knox event is not contained. It is definitely not contained. At the moment, an elderly man, Howard, calls the radio. He is dying. Didn't come into contact with the dead. He followed the quarantine and curfew. Coughing, he assures that the closest he's been to those poor dead bastards was 20 feet. Nevertheless, he got it. He got the sickness. As he's dying, he begins to tell a story about seeing a kid fresh out of diapers yesterday. He couldn't even walk, but he was infected. Howard says he has no hope left. For him, it's over. The woman says she's done with the event infection and scared. But on the other side of the river she got kids, her family all over, men she loves, who doesn't love her back. She'll never be with any of them again. She asks to close the bridges, to do all they have to do, bomb all the zone area, burn the virus, even though there are still many living people inside. She believes that they should be treated as already dead, because they are already dead. In the studio, Latoya from Louisville is reporting that the military is closing the bridges. All of them. Everyone headed north through Louisville, but now there is a traffic. People were just running over with bags. Then soldiers pushed them back, put the barriers up, and, while she is talking, several muffled explosions are heard. At first, no one understands what happened, but then it becomes clear. The bridges have been blown up. In an attempt to isolate the spread of the infection, the authorities have sealed people off within the quarantine zone. They are trapped in the event. No one can get through anymore. Julia is calling from the hospital. It has been abandoned and all the doctors have left. She is the only one remained with a bunch of dying people, or those who have already been lucky enough to die. She is calling from a payphone. She wanted to call her mother, her family, her friends, but nobody is picking up. Apparently, everyone is dead, and dead bodies are everywhere. They're on the floor, they're groaning, moaning, they're hallucinating. Everyone's just left them. Julia needed to talk to someone. That's why she's calling the radio, urging people to avoid hospitals. Don't go anywhere except people. Dead bodies are everywhere, and real soon they will start walking. She's seen this before. Richard called the studio. He was in the Desert Storm and seems like he's the son of Madison who called in the first days. He says that the end has already come. He is sick and living out his last moments, reflecting on the fact that there are things worse than death. For example, the suspended state between life and death that comes for everyone who falls ill. It is the end. The studio temporarily suspends calls to sort through the billing news. The Knox infection has not been contained. No one knows why. No one knows how. Moreover, it has spread beyond the US and is now raging everywhere, definitely in England and Africa. Some places have confirmed cases of the disease. Some have something resembling it, but it is now obvious that things are out of control and complete chaos has reigned. The studio no longer accepts calls with crackpot theories. Now it's all about helping people, helping get through. There are rumors that some people had immunity, but this is not certain. The radio continues working. They are waiting for calls. At noon on the 9th day, Knox Talk Radio is stepping out. The host says they want to spend some time with their families, but more likely, they want to spend their last few days together. Maybe they can do it again someday, but for now on the frequency 101.2 FM, there will be only white noise.